you a woman in medicine feeling overwhelmed and disconnected from the personal fulfillment that you desire? You're in the right place. Join Doctors Joanne and Aaron as they rewrite the rules for women in medicine. Let's begin.
Welcome to this episode of Create Meaning in Medicine. I'm so excited to introduce you to one of my favorite people. Dean Jacobs is our special guest today for episode number 101, and he'll also be doing a two-part episode, so you'll hear him in the next episode as well. And Dean is one of those really special people. I'm in a group with him in this mastermind of Brendan Burchard's. There's between 200 and 300 people. And if you ask any of those people, most of them are going to know who Dean Jacobs is. He stands out in a crowd in a good way. It's not all about, he doesn't come in a room. It's all about me. It's all about you. And he just has this amazing energy. And I am hopeful that some of the lessons I've learned over the last several years with my friendship with Dean, he's going to be able to share with you, our listener, and how lessons he's learned can spill over into those of us who are working in medicine, women physicians, and those in the healthcare fields. So with that, Dean, welcome. And I'm so excited to have you here on this episode where we're unfortunately missing out on our dear co-host, Joanne Sotelo, but she will be joining us in a few episodes from now. So thanks for being here, Dean. And I was chatting with you before the show and wanted to share a really special thing that you and I have some commonalities about reverence for life. I'm a cancer survivor. My sister's a cancer survivor. Many of family members have had cancer. And I have learned to live with this mantra, living with no regrets. And I want you to share with our listener, you had a really close brush with death, and that actually helped you clarify your message even more. And I would love for you to share some of that, those lessons learned with our audience.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me to be a part of your community. I consider that a privilege, my friend. And a special shout out to all the people that you so graciously serve, all those people with servants' hearts in the medicine field. I have such a reverence for. So I just think this is a great opportunity to support that community, and give some good energy and positive energy to all of them. So thanks for having me. It's ironic. I've traveled through 58 countries around the world, climbed volcanoes, stared down silverback mountain gorillas in Rwanda, floated 3,000 miles of the Amazon. But the thing that brought me to my knees was actually something I could not see. And that was actually my struggle to survive malaria. And it was really a profound window of lesson on my journey of life. And so often we take life for granted, and we forget that it's being alive is a privilege, is not a promise. And I really got really clear about that when I was laying in that hospital bed in Omaha, Nebraska, with the amazing people that taking care of me, how precious really life is and all that. So that was really, really, I've had my challenges with life before, and I do push the envelope from time to time, but laying, I was captive. I wasn't going to run away from it. I had to look it right in the eyes and come to terms with how fragile and how precious life really is in that moment. And it was profound for me. So, how could that story serve your community, Aaron, is what I wanted to explore with you.
One of the areas when I talk to physicians is that they don't oftentimes get to hear that follow-up. What happens when that patient they took care of in the ICU or the emergency room or even in their clinic? What happens when they left, when I no longer saw them as a patient? And I shared with some of my clients, if you think about a beach full of, little sand granules, and you might only be able to hear from one patient or a handful of patients, a handful of grains of sand on an entire beach full of people that you made a difference for, people you impacted. And not only the patients you directly served, but as a pediatrician, maybe their parents, that ripple effect. And I oftentimes, when I talk to people who've had some pretty incredible medical stories, about how can you share messages that bring some hope and healing to the people that heal others. Anything that you think would be helpful for maybe the doctors who took care of you, maybe the medical team that took care of you, for them to really understand the impact and how they showed up, how that changed maybe the trajectory of your recovery.
Well, first of all, I don't think we're supposed to suffer alone. And when we come to terms with that or embrace that, I think that's the truth. Then we open up the opportunity for healing, and all the different levels in the medical field and mental and emotional and spiritual field kind of stuff. So when we really embrace those who are supporting us and want to help us heal and find our way forward, and then that creates that creates connection creates a sense of community and relationship. So then we're collectively moving together to help us in our learning journey. So, first of all, kudos. I want to say to your listeners, for all the people who've never said thank you or really didn't know how to say thank you for helping them find the journey. I'll say thank you. And because sometimes we don't have the words for it, but like you're impacting people's lives, not just their life, but everybody else's life that they touch along the way. And it does make a huge difference. And the vibe and the energy that you bring into that space every day, day in and day out, does have an impact. And then also when I was laying there in the hospital bed, I wanted to be responsible for the energy that I brought into that space too. I wasn't just on the receiving end, because even though I was faced with it was really bad. I had falciparum, the worst kind of malaria. I can't even say it, I can't even spell it either. So, but like the worst kind of malaria possible. But I'm a big fan of Viktor Frankl. I know you know that work, Aaron. Like the last great choice of the human freedoms is to choose one's own attitude. And I just kept saying that to myself. I said it to every doctor, nurse, janitor, food person that came into my space. And I wanted to be responsible for the energy I brought into that space. That it's one thing to have a concept around that, and it's a whole nother thing to say, all right, this is my chance to walk my talk, right? And to be authentic to who I chose to be. And it was really special because I feel I tell this. It's not about me, first of all, your listeners. It's not about me, but it is about me in the sense to help them understand that they're making a huge difference. Sometimes it's easy to get burned out because you give so much, but it does make a difference in the energy that you bring into that space. So I love it. There's this beautiful dance that happened every time the nurses and stuff come in, and the doctors and the big researchers, because everybody wanted to see me because they don't get to see malaria very often in Omaha, Nebraska kind of stuff. But they all walked out with a photo. And you know me, Aaron, like everybody gets a photo because I use photography to help people see and be reminded how beautiful the world is. And an intern came up to me at the end of our time together, and she goes, Dean Jacobs, I see a lot of the hardest things of humanity because it's also a trauma center. But spending some time with you actually restored my faith in humanity a little bit. And that like brought me to tears because okay, even though these doctors are given to me, I can also give to them. So there's this beautiful, I think healing happens when it's a dance, not just a receiving end kind of stuff. And it was a beautiful thing.
I love that.
It touched me very deeply, actually.
And you bring up a couple of other topics that I would like to explore. First of all, that back and forth relationship from healthcare provider to the patient and also back again. And I saw a beautiful example of this at an in-person event that my medical society hosted called Notes from the Heart. And we created thank you cards that patients and healthcare providers alike could write. And it wasn't even planned, but one of the most magical moments of that evening was that one of my friends, who's a local physician and had started the hospitalist program, Dr. Jill Pearson, we interviewed her several sessions ago. And she came to the event, and unbeknownst to her and unbeknownst to a former patient of hers that she had cared for in the hospital, they were at this event. And during the event, the patient's dad came up to me and said, Dr. Pearson, I didn't know she was going to be here. Can I nominate her? Can I share? And so here was this beautiful interaction of this patient's parent sharing what she meant to them. And then she came on the microphone and shared back how meaningful that those interactions with this family had been to her, and why being able to keep this family local here in Salem, Oregon, instead of going an hour away to Portland to the big university center, was so powerful and so helpful to her. So it was this beautiful reaffirming of that back and forth connection between doctors and their patients.
I love that. And I'm going to bring in a little Native American to honor the Omaha people that I work with. The word Omaha means the people who move against the current, and you don't go against the current for fun. You do it because you're determined, you got a goal, you got a resilient. That's what the word Omaha means. And it also means that when we are connected together, we can move against the current as a community. We're stronger as we get to do that. And community is the medicine to help us move, keep us together, move us strong. I mean, that's what they say all the time in the Native communities I get to be a part of. Community is the medicine. Medicine not in the pill form, but like medicine in the energetic spiritual sense. And together, when we connect with that intention of supporting each other to heal and to thrive and move forward, it just changes. You start to see things that you couldn't see otherwise, because when you're focused on the problem, we go into survival, and it's hard to come up with creative, out of the box solutions that could really help us grow and heal.
Such a great point about that survival mode. I was just lecturing yesterday to some resident physicians and shared with them the whole premise of our prefrontal cortex, our executive functioning brain in the front of our head. I'm pointing to my forehead.
Yeah, I got one too.
Function when you are in survival mode.
Right.
When you've got fight or flight, freeze or fawn in action, we revert to the back of our brain, our primitive brain. At my other old office, we used to call it the rat brain. And it is not very good. It can't help you find good solutions. And so when
it'll help you survive that moment, and it's very good at that. So, but it's not good at out of the box thinking, because you got to feel safe or be very well trained, like our service people who had to face those kind of things in order to activate and process with that part of our mindset. And most of us, I don't have that kind of training for the most part. I mean, I got some from School of Hard Knocks, but not like people who really trained themselves in that dynamic, right?
And yet we can learn practices. For example, for myself, the practice of meditation that I only started doing maybe 5 years ago, but those thousands of meditations that I've done over the last 5 years, when crisis strikes, I'm able to get out of my survival brain much more quickly than I used to be able to. And I think that's also very powerful, because the other point I wanted to bring up with what you said was, you in your sick state with a very severe case of malaria, with a team of experts who probably hadn't treated much malaria before, and yet you chose to bring mindfulness with every interaction you had. And I would love to hear more from you. How did you get to the place where, even in the state of a medical crisis for yourself, you had the capacity to bring mindfulness and intention to your interactions with individuals?
Well, thank you for asking that question, because it didn't happen by accident, and it's a result of all the conditioning and training my own brain and spirit along the way. Up before that point, I've been doing personal development since 1987, when I read the first book I wrote was Norman Vincent Peale's The Power of Positive Thinking. So I've been on this journey for a long time, in various forms and different ways, striving to grow and to be my best, being curious about who I can become in the face of challenging circumstances. And, sometimes we choose them, sometimes we don't. I didn't choose malaria. I choose to grow and do other hard things, but it's still challenging. And I got to put all that to work, all the personal development and high performance coaching work I've done with Brendan Broussard, and but not only him, but positive power, Norman Vincent Will power, all that stuff I read and consumed in workshops, all got a chance to be put to work. And I do believe in Viktor Frankl's quote, "The last of the great human freedoms is to choose one's own attitude." So I remember saying that out loud to myself and to anyone who came in. And then I put on the whiteboard, "Live, Love, Matter." That should sound familiar, Aaron. And the staff would come in and say, "Well, what is that on your whiteboard?" You know what the whiteboard is. You know it better than I do. Where they write stuff. I go, "That's my reminder what I'm doing here. I'm here to live. I'm here to love. I'm here to still make a difference. Even when I'm in this hospital bed, I get to choose how Dean Jacob shows up in the face of that." And they even said to me, "You're not like any patient we've ever had before." And I go, "Well, I'll take that as a compliment. And then maybe I can role model a potential way to move forward." And look, I end up on a podcast talking about it. I had no idea in the middle of that, right, that I'd be on your podcast one day talking about how to face hard things.
And you bring up a really powerful point, Dean, that I want to pause and expand upon here, because, you're not a normal patient. And what I tell my clients, and I think I've mentioned on this podcast before, is that I don't want my clients, my coaching clients, to be normal or to have normal outcomes in medicine, because normal means higher rates of suicide, maybe even as high as 250 to 400 times or percent higher for women physicians than women in other professions, maybe 1.25, 1.5 times higher for men physicians. And that to me is not okay. And that's the status quo. What are we doing? How is that changing? Burnout rates have decreased from, 50 to 62% range for women in medicine, for those in primary care and those in the emergency department. And it's lowered to maybe 45% for some of those specialties, which is still way too high. So those are the typical outcomes. And I'm looking on my desk here. I usually have it right in front of me, but I don't see it. I tell my clients, there's this statement in medicine where when you think hoofbeats, think horses. So if you showed up with a fever, nobody was going to think malaria first, because malaria is a zebra. It's uncommon in Omaha, Nebraska. If you show up with a fever, you might have strep throat or the flu, but
Well,
probably
they
not
tested me
malaria.
for Ebola, everything. They had
Yeah.
no idea. So
Yeah. And so when we talk about atypical outcomes, not the norm, I share with my clients, I don't even want you to be a zebra. I want you to be extremely rare. I want you to be a unicorn. I
I
don't
love
want you to be normal. And I actually, each of my one-on-one clients, it's going to drive me crazy because I always have this here. I think for my retreat, oh no, here it is. No, there we go. I have a sticker. So I have a couple reminders. So this is a sticker from the Met Museum. My daughter now lives in New York City. And actually, I took a 5-mile trek several weeks ago to buy more journals that have this emblem on the front, because I needed one for my newest one-on-one client. And then I bought a couple extras for the space I'm creating for my next couple of one-on-one clients. So having unicorn outcomes, I don't want you to be normal. This is for our listener. I don't want you to have typical. And as Dean said, he started working in 1987, learning about positive psychology. He was worked with Brendan Burchard, who Joanne and I have also worked with, who is in personal development. And those investments paid off for you. You had no idea that how many years later is that you'd be in a hospital bed and you would need to tap into that investment that you created with, I would say, compound interest over decades. So that not only were you able to empower yourself with your choices as a patient, I'm thinking of the ripple effect that you, Dean Jacobs, created for your medical team when you helped give them hope and inspiration as the patient. How do you think that affected not only those healthcare providers, the janitorial staff, but the other patients that they interacted with? And maybe even today, over a year later, that may still be having an effect on them because you chose to invest in yourself, because you chose to learn how to be mindful, to tap into positive psychology. And here you are, an even better version of yourself, I would bet, because of that experience. And you also chose to give. So powerful.
yeah, well, thank you for that acknowledgement. And I am better as a result of it because I learned from it, and I don't take life for granted. And we all have our edges. We all have our edges that we come up against things along the time, or brushes with our edges that are opportunities for us to be reminded just how precious life is. And then we get some say how we're going to show up in that. And I did lean into 40 years, I guess, or whatever that comes out to, or 30. I'm bad at math. But anyway,
We don't need to do math on the podcast.
well, and I did lean into that. And not only did I lean into it, but I also continued to deposit into it because I'm a believer in it. And I have a lot of confidence and faith in humanity and my own humanity. And then those who I had the privilege to interact with and who are dedicated, committed to take care of me. And that became a synergistic impact. Matter of fact, I even had like phlebotomists like wanting to come pull my blood because they were like competing to come into my room because they wanted to have a little moment of Dean Jacobs stuff, a little bit of that kind of stuff along the way. So yeah, all that work paid off. And I'm so grateful for that. And it's the little daily victories that we can't always see, Aaron, on the personal development, the reflection, the journaling, all those things that continue to move the needle forward, to help us down the path, that empower us. They I call it waving oxygen on our eternal flames. They have us burn even brighter, that then end up making a difference that I'm believing. I don't have as a fact, but I'm sure on occasion they still talk about the day that this guy, they may not even remember my name, but I promise you this, they still had that photo up someplace. Because I've been doing that for years. And every now and then I run across someone who's told me, I've had your photo on my refrigerator for 10, 15 years, to be reminded of how beautiful and how amazing life is.
And we're going to talk more about the work that you do in episode 102. So, listeners, stay tuned for that. What I didn't share with you is that Dean, I think of him as an inspiration creator, a bright light in a room that might be dark. He is an author, a photographer, a speaker, and a coach, and works using kind of his magic to add lightness to the world, add hope and joy to the world. And I wonder, Dean, what specific lesson or what specific change or pivot happened as a result of that brush with death because of your malaria infection?
Well, that's a great pivot. I mean, that is the heart of that's the crutch of the question, right? And I came really close to that I call it the thin veil between the spiritual world and the physical world. I got really close. I was so close I could smell it. And really, the takeaway was like, man, to be alive is a privilege. It is not a promise. And what am I going to do to make it count, to make a contribution? And sometimes we get an idea what that is. The smallest things do make a difference along the way. And it could be just a smile. It's not always saving somebody's life like a lot of people in your audience do, which is amazing in itself. But it could be just as simple as a smile to remind people that we are part of this incredible thing called life, and we all get to be part of the fabric that adds to this amazing tapestry, and then do our part to have it shine bright, and to be grateful that we get to be here.
I love that. And I'm also looking always for ways to lower the bar for the women in healthcare to find new ways of being. And so how small of a little energetic cost can we have, because many of the women in medicine, they don't have extra time, they don't have extra energy, they are so overcommitted and over tapped out and exhausted. So I'm always looking for that tiny little morsel of what can I ask of you to do or commit to. And I love that you gave two things that don't cost a dime. They take moments, and one is to smile at another person and also to be grateful. And when we choose to do those more often, there's that ripple effect. How is that affecting others around you? And also then it allows our reticular activating system, that part of our brain that tells us what's important, to say, oh, smiling's important. Seeking gratitude is important. And the more we practice that, the more we rewire our brain circuitry so that it gets easier and easy for us to do those things. And you may then find yourself doing it without even thinking. I see someone in the hallway, I make eye contact and I smile at them. And then you're giving them a gift, which means you're receiving a gift in return of that. What am I doing to help their day? And then also seeking out gratitude. Two powerful areas that Joanna and I have explored many times on this podcast and are pretty low threshold to maybe add to your day.
Yeah, you don't need a PhD to smile. You don't need a PhD to be grateful. That's a human choice. Go back to Viktor Frankl stuff. And then the reality is that humanity, the humanness is messy. I mean, that's the beautiful thing. None of us are perfect. If we were, it would be really boring. And but also humanity is also contagious. It can either be negative contagious or positive contagious. And when we're intentional about, when we're aware of that, gateway awareness is the gateway to transformation, then we can make a choice. All right, what kind of energy do I want to bring? Because it is contagious. It does have an impact on how people heal, on how people look forward to tomorrow. Because as physicians, I believe part of your job, this is my opinion now, I got to put that, but is to help people find a sense of hope for tomorrow. Hope is an optimism for tomorrow and some belief that you have some say in it. And you do have say in it by what we've put our attention on, by smiling, being intentional about reflecting on and ruminating. Ooh, There's my cow. There's my Nebraska part. Ruminating on what we're grateful for, because that cultivates that energy on the inside, that garden on the inside, and then the bounty and the harvest of that garden. Your people get our people. I'm going to say our people because I'm a part, even though I'm not a female physician, I'm part of the human tribe. We get to share that bounty with the community, and community is the medicine to help us be strong, to move against the current, to show up and continue to fulfill our calling in life.
I love that. And Dean, because it's easy to get trapped in old habits, and our habits don't always serve us. Our brains actually don't always serve us when they're in survival mode because they're trying to protect you, and it's actually causing more harm than good. And so Joanne and I are commonly talking about ways that we can uncouple that circuitry and make some different choices. And I wonder, maybe thinking way back to the beginning of your personal development journey, you shared, back in 1987, and how might somebody who's just starting to have a personal growth journey, just starting to say, can I really change the trajectory of my life, and maybe questioning that, what would you say was helpful for you to make that decision to change stick?
We'll make the change stick. Well, I always feel like you're gathering evidence for whatever you're gathering evidence for, or you're always gathering evidence for whatever you want to gather evidence for. Does that make sense? And I chose to gather evidence that life is a magical journey, and that having dreams is the birthright of all humanity. So rather than gathering evidence for why life is a bummer and it's hard, I chose to gather the evidence for, well, life is this amazing journey filled with blessings. And even when it's hard, there's a blessing, there's an opportunity to learn and grow in that. But that's a choice, a human choice. So if we're not making progress on the things that are really important, then we have to have the courage to look in the mirror and say, well, what do I really believe? What do I really believe about myself, about who I am? And do I really believe it's possible to be a full-time mom, full-time physician, full-time, caregiver, and all those kind of things? And to examine those, and I can't answer those questions for people. We can, as a coach, we get to explore those kinds of questions, right, Aaron, along the way. But to give ourselves permission to feel that it's possible, to examine our beliefs, and then land on those as an expression of who we want to be in the world and the contribution we want to make. I just believe none of us are here by accident. I just believe life is so precious. And what am I going to do to honor that belief and that gift that I've been given? How do I continue to nurture that? I have my own little rituals. I breathe every morning. I have my morning routine. I breathe to honor the four directions, the Native American aspects of things that guide me along the way. I reflect on all the blessings life has given me. The birthplace of Jesus and Buddha, and been the base camp of Everest. All that stuff still lives in me. And it's not just locked away in a box. It's like this living experience that I cultivate and reconnect with, knowing that it's here to serve me so that I can be of service to others. But when I don't take the time to reflect, you know this, Aaron, just as well as I do. When I don't take the time to reflect in that sense of gratitude, I start to end up empty. And I'm tired. And I'm exhausted. And I'm feeling, there's that line from Tolstoy, the Lord of the Rings. I feel like butter spread too thin across toast, kind of thing, like been spread myself too thin along the way. Then it's up to me to take the time to reconnect and reboot and refresh myself. For me, it's time in nature. Go for walks, breathing, listen to the winds, smell the flowers, listen to the birds, and reconnect that, be reminded there's a natural rhythm to life, no matter who we are and what we're doing in the world. But like when I get in alignment with that rhythm again, I'm a force to be reckoned with. I might be tired, and then I'll be responsible for the choices I make about that tiredness. Am I drinking water? Am I sleeping enough? How's my eating? To have a sense of agency and all that. And then, yes, it's possible to learn and grow. Look at me. I'm a truck driver's son. My mom never learned how to drive a car. If you looked at my history, where I came from before I started doing this, I did not fit the pattern. So if nothing else, I'll be a role model of what's possible for people if they're willing to give themselves permission to dream, maybe for the first time or again, because that dream was a gift from the divine, I believe, not just some random thing.
I love that. And you brought up so many powerful themes that Joanna and I have explored. You talked about time and nature, and I'm going to remind our listener that episode 97 is an interview with Dr. Tamberly, and she is our friend and literal tree hugger, talks about the benefits in nature. So if you want more information about how important it is for us to get outside, we spend too much time inside, go to episode number 97 and take a listen to that. You brought up a few other very important themes that I know that as a coach, I share with my clients. And one of those is the power of choice. And when I began getting coached, at age 50, I was at a place where I felt like a victim in my own life. Oh, poor me. I work so hard. Nobody appreciates me. And I was the only one in my relationships that was getting coached. The only doctor I knew getting coached, the only leader on my leadership team, the only one in my marriage. My kids weren't getting coached, just me. And yet, because I chose to get coached and because I chose to make different decisions, I then got different outcomes in all of my relationships. And oftentimes we look outward, blaming others. Who's at fault for this? And in medicine, I'm not saying that like it is not a bed of roses at all in medicine, corporate medicine. There's a lot of hardships in medicine. So I'm not minimizing that. And yet what I found is that when I focused on those things that I did have agency over, that I could control, and I showed up differently, that impacted everyone around me. And again, as Dean said, it can be like a contagion, positive or negative energy. How do I choose to show up? How do I choose to start conversations? How do I choose to treat others? And if I'm not doing my job on my A game, as Dean said, looking inwards and saying, what's missing? Where's my self-care? What are the basics? How am I sleeping? And so that time to reflect and ask what's going on with me that's affecting how I'm showing up, that's then is impacting my outcomes. We do have a role in that.
Yeah, and excellent point, Aaron. And I also want to add, because I could just hear the voices like, yeah, but I got so much going on. You don't have to change everything at one time. Just find one thing that you can start to do. I didn't get to where I was. I didn't get to where I am and how I show up in a weekend. It's been a process, a little daily process every day, a little bit better, and then celebrating those wins when they come, right? Because when people don't create the emotional identity of I'm someone who does hard stuff or I'm someone who takes care of myself, then we never really feel the fulfillment of that. So, gather the evidence for why it's possible. Celebrate the wins when they come, when you make the choices that help move that needle in the right direction. And what you'll start to feel and sense that you have some say in how life goes, the energy that you bring into the space and how that is a positive contagion into everybody that you interact along the way. And then all of a sudden life starts to take on a different feeling, a different quality to it, aliveness, as our friend Brendan likes to say.
And you also talked about rituals. And I think that in the modern day world, and especially for healthcare providers, we don't have time for rituals and even positive habits. And yet, when we don't bake those into our regular schedule, then things just seem a little bit, well, not a little bit, a lot chaotic. And one of the areas where I coach my clients in is using a planner system that helps create rituals. How do you start each day? How do you end each day? How do you start each workday? How do you shut down each workday? And it bakes in some habits, and you can habit stack so that one leads to another, and then you can almost turn off your brain. You go into autopilot and you do these positive things. And so I would encourage our listener, can you find one thing? I'm going to smile at 3 people today. I'm going to look for 3 things I'm grateful for before I put my head on my pillow, or I'm going to start my day with looking for, 3 positive things, whatever that is. As Dean said, start with one thing. And then once that gets familiar and easy, then you can stack onto that and continue to build. It's kind of like compound interest in the bank. You put a few pennies in every few days, those pennies grow, and then you can start putting in nickels and dimes and quarters. And eventually, with enough time and coins in the bank, you'll end up with $1 million and have that wealth to rely on.
Yeah. And then celebrate yourself for those wins.
Yep. Every
right?
penny.
Every penny. Yay. I do a happy dance. I do whatever I have to do well, you've seen my dancing, Aaron, and bring the joy. We don't wait for the joy to show up. We bring it. Right. And that changes the day, changes people's lives. My goal every day is to make at least one person smile.
Yeah. And I think you make more than one person smile a day. I'm going to do a quick recap here. Dean, you shared about how we can sometimes take life for granted, and you had a life-threatening illness that helped you clarify even more just how fragile and precious life is. You shared about don't suffer alone, create connections and community to build relationships, and that you shared about the Omaha people and about going against the current as a community and how that makes the trip easier. And that we can make community part of our medicine, not the pill kind of medicine, but healing. You talked about your personal development journey starting back in the 80s and how you have continued to build that, not overnight, but over decades of practices, and that you can make contributions about experiencing being alive or adding more aliveness with something as simple as smiling at someone or showing gratitude. And that awareness, I think you said awareness is the gateway to transformation or change. And yeah, without that awareness. So, our goal here on the podcast is for our listener to raise your awareness about things that might be blind spots for you. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And then it's up to you to make those choices. And as Dean shared, there is the ability to gather evidence that life is an amazing journey filled with blessings. And if we can find that positive mantra, that positive take, we will train our brains, rewire them to look more for the positive and not revert to the negative. And then the power of taking time to reflect. So great. Dean, I would love for our listener, if they want more information about the work that you do or how to find you, where can they look you up?
Well, you can I have my own website, Dean Jacobs, DEANJACOBS.org. That'll take you to my website. It has all my contact information and other information on there.
Excellent. And any social media platforms that?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, Dean Jacobs Adventures. I'm on Instagram. I'm also in the process of making my own app. So in the future, so that way I can, people don't go down the wormhole of others getting distracted with other social media. They can just consume the stuff of mine that they want to and not be distracted.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the power of your story that you shared with our listener today, Dean. And I would encourage our listener, if you found inspiration in this, if you would like for the Create Meaning in Medicine podcast to get in front of other listeners, do us a favor and go to the show and find those stars, rate the show, give us some comments if you listen on Apple Podcasts or on YouTube, and let us know how we can serve you better. And stay tuned because our next episode with Dean Jacobs is coming right up.
Do you want exclusive resources and the opportunity to connect with us? Then visit createmeaninginmedicine.com now, where you'll dive deeper into how you can create meaning in medicine. And if you're serious about optimizing your results, take 2 quick steps now. Connect with us on the website and tune in to the next episode.